The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Burdinsky. This is the episode for May 25, 2017. Ralph Tomaselli has the night off, but in the studio, two special guests handling the economic development function for the town of Wallingford, a member of the Economic Development Commission, Mark Gingras, and the Economic Development Specialist, Tim Ryan. Thanks for coming on the Citizen Mike Show.
Pleasure to be here, Mike.
Yeah, we got a lot of content planned in the area of economic development. Tim, maybe this is one for you to get us going. Bristol-Myers, I mean, you talk about economic development, that's what comes to mind in the conversation. What's going to happen? Where's it going? You know, is it going to be vacant? Who's interested? What do we do? Is it a prison, a hospital? You know, all these things. So we wanted to talk to you. What's going on?
Well, I wish I had great news for everybody, but it's coming up on 2 years since Bristol-Myers announced their decision to take and well, initially vacate the property with part of their staff. They break their staff into two categories. One is discovery, which are all the research scientists, and non-discovery, which is marketing, legal, you know, et cetera. Yeah. And initially they were going to leave the non-discovery folks in town, upwards of 500 jobs, but that it was announced in this past fall that since is evaporated and they're leaving the state lock, stock, and barrel. So they have been working with a commercial broker named Binswanger to sell the property for coming up on 2 years. It's about 2 years now. And we both wish that they had someone to buy the property, but that is not the case at this point. So,
what's the problem with selling it? Is it too much money? I mean, it's a huge property. Obviously, it's a huge property, so there's got to be a big asking price. But what's the problem? Is it price? Is it the economy? Is it a special use building? What do you think?
It's changes in the research and development realm, and that's why Bristol-Myers is they're first off they're going someplace with a lease space, not own space. They own the building as it stands right now. If anybody has a spare $50 million for a 1 million square foot facility, it's actually a pretty good buy.
I wish Ralph was here. He would, you know, he would chip in.
But you know, we've had the benefit of Bristol-Myers being in town for over 30 years, and the facility is a purpose-built facility for medical research and development. It is there's a lot of laboratories in there. It is a difficult property, I'm told, by Bristol-Myers themselves and Binswanger to take and retrofit. So it's a matter of trying to find someone who does something similar. But what happens is the process for that is changing. The business model is changing. So to find someone who could step in that does something similar is not necessarily the case. Okay.
So, Mark, what is the consequences? Is this a grand list consequence? That is it there aren't people working there buying local gasoline, going to local? Is it that? I mean,
it's a huge grand list problem.
Yeah.
And it's uppermost certainly in the DC's mind, but you have to have a special person to buy it. I mean, you're going to spend that kind of money, you're going to use that kind of a building. They have to be special. So forget all the ancillary things that happen. They buy gas, they go to the local restaurants, those types of things. Just the grand list alone, it's a big number. So.
There was a decision by the town of Wallingford, actually by the Planning and Zoning Commission, I think it was in January, it might have been February of 2017, to change the zone to disallow charitable organizations. This is sort of a rough summary of what it was. At about the time that Bristol-Myers went in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission to say they had a buyer, and it was a school. It was a for-profit, tax-paying school, but it was a school. And then I guess the Planning and Zoning Commission, well, it's on record, didn't like that use, changed the zone so a school couldn't go in there. Now it's under appeal in Hartford. Documents and exhibits are being filed. They're all online. It's all public record. But so if Bristol Myers wins, I guess a school goes in, and I'm wondering what the problem is. Is it a grand list issue? Is that something you can comment on? Just what are the issues there?
So let me start. Let me back up to the January date that you referred to, Mike. So this was actually a recommendation that came out of the Economic Development Commission.
You guys.
Right, to disallow, change the language in the industrial zones, in our I-5 and I-X zones, to disallow religious and educational uses. Now, there was a third use called philanthropic use, which zoning regulations talk about land uses, and philanthropic is not a land use. Religious and educational are land uses. Warehouse distribution is a land use. So the word philanthropic was kind of a head-scratcher as to why it was in the first place. So from our standpoint, we're saying we asked to have the religious and educational uses removed from our industrial zones on the fundamental premise that industrial zones are there for industrial development and, in our opinion, not necessarily for educational or religious development. We also feel strongly that every community has a social responsibility to make certain that there is a certain amount of religious uses allowed, and almost every other zone in Wallingford allows religious uses. So by pulling out religious and educational uses, we felt that and that goes throughout the entire I-5 and I-X zones. So if you think about it, other buildings in those zones, the Quest Diagnostics building right now, which is almost totally vacant. Quest has reduced the amount of space that they use in that building dramatically. They've got the building on the market. And that could become a school. In this particular case, Bristol Myers is saying, yes, we have a for-profit school, but that doesn't mean that the next person down the road may not have a for-profit school, and then it has even a bigger impact on our grant list. So,
okay.
And as far as what happens, as you alluded to, Mike, or mentioned directly, that Bristol Myers is presenting a legal challenge to that decision. So I'm comfortable saying what I said, but I shouldn't say any more than that.
Let's leave it there.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll continue to read about it in the papers, and good luck on finding some.
I think it should also be added that we have a limited amount of land left in the town,
right?
And we have to really look at that judiciously.
As long as you mentioned it, Mark, let's take that up now. I think it's been said, and I think maybe it's occurred to everybody, that one of the challenges that the town of Wallingford has is that there aren't tracts of cornfields lying around that could be used for new construction, new commercial and industrial construction. There's a limited amount of cornfields around. Right? What sort of a challenge, Tim, if any, and maybe I got it wrong, but is that a challenge for economic development, whatever that may mean, which we'll get to in a few minutes?
Yes, it absolutely is. So in the Plan of Conservation and Development, which was shepherded and completed by the Planning and Zoning Commission this past year, in there, there's a task that says that we're going to revisit the open space requirements in our I-X zone.
What does that mean? Just define it for the viewers.
Okay, so open space requirement on a particular lot. Well, let's go back to, some of us remember when those industrial parks, Barnes North and South, were apple orchards. I being one. Mark, I'm sure, is another, and perhaps you do as well, Mike. So when they developed the parks, they developed the parks with a lot of green space. So 50% of the land on any one parcel needs to be green, trees, grass, etc. Not building, not parking lot. That leaves another 50% to be developed. Within that 50%, half of that has to be for parking, or what they call impervious surface. So what it means is that the amount of building that can happen on a lot is relatively restricted. So to get back to your question, is there an issue with not enough available land for industrial development in town? There is, because so we're looking at it and saying, well, it's the old adage, it's land they're not making anymore. So let's take a look at the land that we have in our industrial parks, and is there a way that we can reduce the open space requirement to create opportunity to develop more in the parks where they are?
Has that been done?
It's in our Plan of Conservation and Development. It is on our task list. So it's something that we will be working with in economic development along with our town planner.
What about large tracts of land? Do we have as much as any other town in the area, or are we coming to the end of large tracts of land that someone can come in and build a new complex on?
There are some in town, but very few compared to other towns in the area.
Right.
We've kind of used up our land, in past development that we've had. So it's not quite as big as we would like it to be, certainly. But that leads us into another a subject, and that is the office space in town. I know we continually talk about it. We have an overabundance of office space in town. And how can that be used differently? How can it be zoned differently? So we're trying to analyze that to see.
So long as you raise it, what's the answer to that? What's the answer to both those issues? One, the office space. Are you thinking of relaxing the zoning to permit?
Well, that's under advisement now. We're looking at that. We don't know if that's the right way to go. Okay. And we have to make those kinds of judgments before we even present it to anybody who makes the actual final decision. That's under planning and zoning. They're the ones who do all of that. But it's a fact. So if it's a fact and we need some space, what can we do to present something likable to the town and the planning and zoning people to say, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do it, or let's not do it.
So let's solve it right now. I mean, we're just talking. No one's listening. It's just the three of us. No one's listening. So we got two issues that seem pretty common sense to me. Seem pretty uncomplicated. One is you relax the requirement for open space, and we can argue and bargain and split the difference between whether 50% coverage of a building or a building could be 75% or 80. I mean, we can go back and forth and then figure it out, just through negotiation and compromise. This is ultimately up to the Planning and Zoning Commission, to do that?
Correct.
And are they waiting for your recommendation? Are they waiting for, this has been an issue a long time. Why not just do it? What are we waiting for?
Yeah, I think they're looking at the issue the same way we're looking at the issue, so it's almost in tandem. The nice thing about this town, I'm not sure about others, but this town, the commissions seem to work very well together. So if there's a recommendation that we have, planning and zoning, at least in my experience, has always been very well listened to when we make a proposition. And vice versa. When they come up with suggestions, they may say, what do you think? How is it going to affect the development of town? We want to do this. So it works out well. We even have a liaison, and we'll go into it a little bit later, but we even have a liaison on our commission with planning and zoning, who attends all planning and zoning meetings, who has all these discussions with that. So
if I can add, Mike, what we're touching on is part of what economic development commissions do, and that is try to create opportunities that are out there. So in looking at the open space requirement in our IX zone, for example, I had a meeting with Casey Costello, our town planner. We invited in several developers. And we said, we spoke to the developers and tried to get their input. So what's ideal? If it's 50% now, should it be 30, 35, 40? I mean, what should it be? We then have to take and look at every single one of the parcels in the industrial parks and play what if. So it's a bit of an exercise. So, frankly, there are a lot of good things going on right now.
Walk me through the what if. Just finish that thought, because I'm not sure I'm following you, the what if.
Okay, so you take a parcel now that's a good-sized parcel. Let me digress once again. So the industrial parks were built with large industry in mind. What's happening now is that the market is being filled with small specialty manufacturing, which is great. All right, and we've got more than our fair share. So we're the envy of the area. When big companies move out, not necessarily big companies come in. Some of the parcels are too big to take care of what today's needs are. So the idea is to take a look at what's there and say, how does it look if it's smaller? How does it look if we can lop off a corner and build a specialty manufacturing facility, a smaller specialty manufacturing facility? So it's a matter of adapting it to what today's uses are. Same thing with the office space that Mark brought up. So we've got an abundance of office, and all of the reports, we've been to a number of meetings. We work very strongly and closely with the brokerage community on projecting what the suburban office market is going to look like, not just what it looks like now, but what it's going to look like on the go forward.
Good news?
And it's not pretty. So you start looking at the office space that's available, and you say, in a free market economy, and I'm a free market economist, in a free market economy, you've got to provide some opportunity for someone to come in and bring the building to another life. What's it going to be in its next life? And in some cases, does it have the possibility of a next life without being taken down? So those are all things that...
Some of these offices have been vacant for well over a year.
Yeah.
And it's tough. They're not on the tax roll.
Right.
They're not being used at all productively. So we have to try to figure out ways to get people interested in, and part of that may be part of zoning. So that's the proposal everybody's
So
looking
I'm
at.
coming at this from a tax-paying activist. Okay? Anytime someone adds something to the grand list that wasn't there before, they pay a little more taxes, I pay a little less. Right? Does that make mathematical sense?
Well,
they
you-
pay a little more does. I don't know about the you
Yeah.
pay a little less.
I
But
agree
that's
with
a-
that.
You'll be paying a little more
Dark
too,
humor.
but not as much.
Okay.
Yeah, that was dark. So when maybe zoning is too restrictive, it's philosophical discussion, but let's say you have an office building or a lot of office space, it's vacant or going to be vacant or a risk of being vacant, why have any use restrictions? I mean, any sort of commercial, industrial, or office, what's the problem with that? Or maybe that's what it is now.
Zoning is very purposeful. And
And
we are...
I'm hearing it's not working, though. That's-
Well, but no, it's very purposeful, and it does work.
Okay.
But what our job sometimes is to do is to sit down with Casey Costello, who is excellent to work with, by the way. We're very fortunate that we have a very
Yeah.
open-minded town planner, and present her opportunities. So when we presented her the opportunity of looking at the IX zone and saying, potentially reducing the open space requirement, it wouldn't have got into the Plan of Conservation and Development if she didn't endorse the fact that it's worth looking at. So that becomes a process.
I don't want to beat this up too much,
Okay.
but I am mindful that the Plan of Conservation and Development is a 10-year document.
It is.
And I'm thinking, when I say I'm more of an activist, I'm thinking more in terms of 10 minutes. All right,
Yeah.
10 weeks.
Yeah.
All right, I'll tell you what, I'll go 10 months to get some resolution, but the size of the campuses, the open space, that's been kicking around a long time. That issue's been kicking around a long time. What to do about the glut of office space, that's been kicking around a long time. If we wait for the implementation committee, who is dealing with the Plan of Conservation and Development, it'll be 10 years. I mean, they're not the
Well,
body that has
you-
authority. It's the Planning and Zoning Commission, and you guys that have, I guess, the bully pulpit to some degree, yeah, to do that. So,
Well, from EDC standpoint.
yes, thank you, Mark.
We have it in our mind that we don't want to see the POCD book that
Right.
thick
Yeah.
put on a shelf.
Yeah.
And then it's gone for 10 years and then bring it back again. We don't want to see that. So it's constantly brought up in our meetings. It's in the minutes.
And
It's
I'm
const-
saying that's a
it's-
false
it's
goal.
con-
See,
and
I
it's
always
constant.
said that on the show. It's a false way of approaching it. The Planning and Zoning Commission has the authority to do it on their own.
But I have to finish my statement
Sorry.
before
Go ahead.
you call it false.
All right.
And that is that we have someone on our committee,
Right.
a commissioner, who also works with planning and zoning on this and is on that implementation committee.
Right.
So we're from our end, are pushing the committee along. The committee is pushing. Jim Seichler's in charge of it. He's a good man. I don't think it's going to happen in 10 minutes, 10 weeks,
10 months.
or 10 months. But I don't think it's going to be 10 years either. There's a lot, and it's not just zoning of office space
Right.
or campus-like things over at Barnes Park. There's a lot of things within the POCD to talk about.
Yeah.
And I know you want to talk about them tonight, and that's
Yeah, we're gonna talk about
transit-oriented and
Yeah.
Mike, if I just may just comment about the subject of taxability in office buildings that came up earlier.
Sure. Yeah.
A vacant office building is still paying property tax, but we don't get the benefit of all the economic multipliers that go along with a full office building. Meaning
Equipment.
people, meaning, personal property taxes, which a office building is the highest taxable use of any category, when you take a look at warehouse distribution, et cetera, even manufacturing. Manufacturing equipment, even though it's bigger, larger, in many cases more expensive, it's tax exempt under state statute. So office buildings, again, they pay property tax. We're missing out on personal property tax. We're missing out on 100-plus employees that may go to lunch on Route 5, that may go to the gas station at noontime, maybe do their banking in town, that type of thing. So,
To change the subject a little bit.
mhm.
Mark, you and I were talking off camera, and I asked you sort of if the Economic Development Commission could get a Christmas gift, if they could, wave a magic wand, what would you ask for? What would you want to aid your mission?
Well, I think one of the reasons that we are what we are is that we are purposeful for building the town's economy, building the town's business. Ultimately, the goal for us is the grand list. That's the important thing for us. So we did a survey, and we worked with CERC.
CERC
is a Connecticut Economic Resource Center.
Okay.
And they did a study for us, and then we also did a program over at the local country club where we brought 50, 60 business people in, town officials in, town heads for departments. And we decided that it's much better to go out and use everyone to promote economic development rather than 7 commissioners and 3 alternates.
Now, walk me through how that would work in the field, to sort of, in practice.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
in practice,
Yeah.
what you have to do is you have to talk about the benefits of the town, because that's what brings people into the town is their benefits. So we constantly harp on, and you'll see it on the highways, of our power. We have excellent power. We have very well-priced power, as most of us who live here know, but it's also, what people don't think about is reliability. There are people who use Wallingford as a redundancy. They have businesses in other towns, and yet they had used Wallingford as a redundancy of your electricity because we're seldom down, even during the worst storms. And if we are down in the worst storms, the electric division does a very good job in getting us up pretty fast. So you have that. We have a good school system. We're centrally located. And that's a big, big plus for us, because we did a survey. Our CERC did a survey, and we've used it. And within 20 minutes of Wallingford, you've got about 50% of the population of the state of Connecticut. Well, that's great for an employer, because the most important thing for an employer right now is to get people. You can talk about taxes, you can talk about electricity, you can talk about schooling. Just getting people can be a difficult thing for an employer right now.
So what I'm hearing is it's sort of what you would like is more of a grassroots kind of a word of mouth on the golf course, around the poker table.
Right, and that's what we're building on. It's the reason we're on this show tonight. We want people to understand us more. We've had some articles in a newspaper, purposeful, because we want people to know more about us. We're going to business. So we're saying, look, you're located in Wallingford. Are you happy with Wallingford? The mayor and several other department heads come with us. Are you happy with Wallingford? Yes. Well, then you have some suppliers that may want to move. How about having them move to Wallingford to be closer to you? That type of a grassroots thing. For us to set up a booth in New York City at Javits Center and say, we're Wallingford, come and see us, is a waste of money. It just isn't going to happen. Plus, the way the state is right now, it doesn't have a good reputation for business. We're hoping that it will in the future, but it doesn't. But Wallingford has a great reputation, and we want to build on that. But we can't do it with the 7 of us or 10 of us. We have to do it with the 45,000 of us, just constantly talking about Wallingford.
So we're talking about economic development, and economic development is a term everyone uses, but I'm not sure it means the same thing to everybody. So what is economic development? How do we know if we're getting it? How do we measure whether our economic development efforts are paying off, whether there's a real result, a real direct consequence from the effort we put in? How do we know it when we see it, and how do we measure effectiveness of the program?
So at the end of the day, as Mark mentioned, it's grand list growth.
Grand list growth.
Grand list growth. Now, economic development, our job is to take and grow the business base of the town. I will add the caveat I'll add the caveat of grow the business of the town, but stay within the character of the town. So this is not grow the business at any cost. We do get calls, and I have fielded a number of calls over the last couple of years since I've been doing this, from businesses that we have open conversations with, and in some cases suggest that this may not be the best fit for them, and it may not be the best fit for us. Or they'll ask if, do you think that Wallingford would be open to this particular use? And it's not my position to say one way or the other. I don't speak for the entire town. But I have suggested to some folks that you may find that it's going to be a little bit of an upward pull if you want to try to locate that type of business. So it's economic, it's grand list growth. Now, the other thing is that what happens naturally, not only in towns but in any business, is customer churn. So customer churn means some move out, some move in. So your question is, well, how do you measure, whether you're getting anywhere? We are very proud to say that, in the last several years, last year we started 54 brand new businesses in the town of Wallingford. In 2015, we started 56 new businesses. In 2014, 49 new businesses.
But what's the net? Because some leave.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
some leave. And it's you can start. It's the old baseball analogy. You can hit 3 singles, but the guy that hits the home run is the one that gets the RBIs, right? So we start 56 new businesses and lose a Bristol Myers. Yeah. But then you say to yourself, well, if we didn't start the 56 new businesses, where would we be? So you certainly need to take. We used to call it the sales funnel. You've got to keep pouring stuff on the top in terms of new businesses in this analogy, because stuff's going to run out the bottom. It's just the way it works. Ideally, you throw stuff in the top faster than it runs out the bottom. The difference is net growth. So we are looking at a pretty flat grand list at this point. But when you have the likes of Bristol Myers, which we haven't felt the complete impact of Bristol Myers.
No, it's just going to start in the
Just
next
started.
year or two, probably.
But you have a Verizon. Now, in 2014, Verizon, they employed almost 1,000 people up in Alexander Drive. In 2014, we were the beneficiary of a Verizon reorganization that had them closing call centers throughout other parts of the state and moving them all to Wallingford. 2 years later, they're gone. So, and those are corporate decisions. They didn't leave because of Wallingford. They left because of a corporate decision to reorganize nationally. So, it's a tough fight because you're always fighting to put stuff on the top of the funnel.
Right. So I'm not sure I can phrase this thought very well, very quickly. But our grand list has been flat for a while. The grand list of area towns hasn't been great either. But if the measure is grand list growth, so now comes the measure of the success of the local economic development function. If the test of whether, Mark, you're doing the job, doing it well, doing it effectively is grand list, so everyone can make up their mind, I suppose, if it's based on the grand list, what kind of a grade do you get on that? Or is there another way of measuring it? But I think it's fair to ask to go to the taxpayer and say to you, the taxpayer should ask you guys, how do we know whether you guys are doing it the most effective way? What do you point to as a measure? Maybe it's anecdotal successes. I mean, I don't know, but I just wanted to press that a little bit further. How do we measure the effectiveness of your effort?
I mean, the dollar bottom line is the grand list. There's no two ways about it.
Right.
But if we didn't have the 54 come in, we believe the grand list will be less than it is now.
But how do you know the 54 wouldn't have come in anyway?
Well,
Because several of them we've shepherded.
we
in.
shepherded it.
That I
We brought them
want to
in.
talk to you about is,
Right.
in a sec.
And we had brought them in. So I think that bottom line, you have to look at the grand list because that's definitive. You know that. You can see it every year. That's where you're at. Beyond that, it's just you're looking at a quality of life. You're looking at the type of businesses that come into the area. I think that the surrounding towns is a very good indicator. Now, right now, the town of Southington is very hot on some things that are happening to them, but they weren't developed before. And now they're able to develop some land that was just wide open, and now they can do it. We don't have that. We have repositioning. For instance, a Cumberland Farms is going where the Villa Capri was. There was some space opened in front of the Lowe's that's now been filled out. So we're finding pockets where we can get some things done, but we don't have large tracts of land to deal with.
So I'm going to get to the anecdotal successes in a second, Tim. But we started with the notion of the grand list. But I still want to press the point a little bit more. We have tax abatement programs, and my general question to be, well, how's that working out? We're trying to advertise, and we have for a long time, low power rates. How's that working out? We try to push the fact that we're centrally located. How's that working out? And it seems like the grand list is still flat. And even though, I guess on paper, Wallingford should be killing big elephants, hitting home runs, given that trifecta and a good school system and, clean, tidy neighborhoods and a low crime rate, it's still basically a sort of a flat, ho-hum grand list. What do we do? I mean, how would you address that as far as the economic development
in my
program
opinion, it's a matter of assessing the playing field and what's happening in other places as well. So let's start with the state of Connecticut. And, Mark and the EDC, and we don't want to make excuses. We want to plow on. We want to try to attract good businesses that again, are within character of this community. We're pushing uphill every single day because the state of Connecticut has such a poor reputation as a high-cost place of doing business. In fact, we lost the opportunity to put a global engineering center in town a year ago. It was in 2016. We had a facility. They had. What happens is that a site selector will call economic development office, get me on the phone, talk about specifics that they have. We'll introduce them to the community. We'll talk about everything Wallingford. We'll sell that central location. We'll sell access to the workforce. We'll sell access to the highway systems and ease of getting to and from work.
Bringing department heads in at times.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll sell the fact that on an equalized mill rate basis, that's something we should probably talk about for a second. Wallingford is recognized as one of the top 10 most affordable places to do business in the state of Connecticut. We'll talk about electric rates, et cetera. So we got them to the point. All right. So we're in the 8th inning of this deal.
And they're on the hook so far.
And they decide they're not going to locate in Connecticut because they're concerned about Connecticut's long-term fiscal outlook and the fact that if Connecticut's fiscal outlook is what it is, and we know it's dire, that they'll have no choice but to go back to tax-paying businesses for solutions. And they said, we're just not going to take that chance in the state. So that doesn't happen every day, but it happens. It's reality. How many people never even call because of that?
It's more of a reality.
So, right. Yeah. It's more of a reality. So, Mike, to measure, we were very cognizant of the fact that we would love to see grand list growth. As Mark pointed out, the 56 and 54 and 49 businesses that I mentioned over the last 3 years, we are the envy of our surrounding communities. I can say that. And I don't want to be boasting. It's just we are. Because I go to economic
That's why we brought you in the show, so you could boast, though. I don't want you to be bashful about that. I mean, we're out there. This is promotion. Come on, sure. This is the shot.
And it's not just economic development. It's working in harmony with planning and zoning. It's working in harmony with the building department. With our tax assessor. We've worked harmoniously in a couple of pro forma projects with our tax assessor as far as a best use for a particular piece of vacant space that was for sale. Our electric division. Rick Hendershot, Georgia Dare, I go to companies and say, if you have any questions about what it would your cost of operation, these are real dollars, give me 12 months of your electric bills where you are now. And I take them down there, and they plug in our rates over the same time period, and we come out a shining star every single time. So anyway, we are attractive to many, and we've got a lot of people that we have shepherded through the process and brought into town. We're very happy with that.
So,
but we'd obviously like to see the grand list grow, and we recognize that.
I want to do a little shift in the conversation and focus on, Tim, your role as economic development specialist. And off camera, we were talking about some specific deals that you felt you made a material difference in. And I just wanted you to pick one or two, sort of compress the success story of your position. This is you're at the plate now. Bases are loaded, 3 and 2. You can win the game. With this.
One or two is not enough for him. He's done a lot more.
Well, and because I mean, we see in the newspaper sort of the puff pieces, and our audience is pretty sophisticated. We know a puff piece when we see it. And promotion is fine. Everyone does it. Every town sort of promotes their own successes or their own advantages. So, we see that too. But what we don't see is this specific step-by-step deal that you may have put together, and how your office made a material difference. And that's what I wanted to get from you. I don't want to pull teeth, but
you're asking me to brag, and it's not.
Yeah, I'm asking you to brag. I'm kind of insisting on it, and if I have to, enlist Mark, I will, I suppose.
Well, I mean, I'll use a very recent one with Hops and Mozzer coming back to town. So
start with who they are and where they are now, so we can get oriented on. Viewers.
So Hops and Mozzer is a manufacturer, of medical device, and they do some aerospace work. So they actually, when I was a young kid, down on Route 5, had their factory where the Burger King is right now. It's Burger King, Advanced Auto Parts, and the Wells Fargo. That was the Hops and Mozzer factory on Route 5 for anybody who's been around a long time. And they have a very successful operation over in Durham. This is pure growth. So they're not leaving Durham, they're staying in Durham, but they've got, the business is good, and they needed more space. So I was contacted by the president of Hops and Mozzer to take and help try to find a piece of property.
Did you play golf together or something?
No,
Why would
no,
he even know there exists a Tim Ryan?
Well, he probably didn't know Tim Ryan existed, but he knew an economic development office may be able to assist in this particular case.
Okay.
Right? So, I think he wanted to look Wallingford's way because he was aware that the electric costs were lower and that the taxes were more reasonable in many areas.
And his employees could get to and from. I mean, his employees are sort of right here locally, so that would work for him.
All new employees. So these are new hires. This is a pure expansion of his business.
Okay.
He was looking in other communities. So, we pride ourselves in being responsive. So someone calls, we call everybody back. We were on the phone with him. We set up a meeting within a couple of days. Went over to Durham, sat in their boardroom, got introduced to Hops and Mozzer, what they do, because part of what we want to do is make sure it's a company that fits within the character of the community.
No smokestacks.
This is not a smokestack, environmentally, challenging business. This
no
is
slaughterhouses.
Good, clean. Manufacturing, small manufacturing business. So they fit the bill, or it's great.
Yeah.
Well, let me see what we can do about trying to find you space. So we go through, what is he looking for in terms of size of building, space? How about location? Does that make a difference? What power requirements may they have? We get all those specs down on a piece of paper, and then we come back and we go to work. And we happen to find the building over at 62 Barnes Road. And Barnes Industrial, it's not 62 Barnes Road, it's 62 Barnes Industrial Road North, right across from Holochrome. Since then, they purchased the building, and they're open for business by the end of this month.
So why didn't a commercial realtor do this for him?
Well, he called me, but the building was listed with a commercial broker. So once I spoke to them, it was a matter of getting them to go see the building. So I get back to the Hops and Mozzer folks to say, this is what this building lays out like. I've contacted the broker already. He has sent me all the building specs. The brokerage community sends me building specs all the time. I've got a stack of every available building in town, square footage, ceiling heights, do they have docks, if their docks are street height, etc. All the particulars on a building, so as I'm talking to people, I can take and help market those buildings. So we work closely with the brokerage community and don't circumvent the brokerage community. That's a very
No, I wasn't suggesting that you did.
No, we don't. No.
But what I was getting at, and I wanted you to address this. So if I am a business owner and I want to find a new location, commercial real estate, that's why I pay the broker tens of thousands of dollars. I call up my broker and I say, is your name Tim Ryan or you're Tim Ryan Light? I would ask the broker to do that. Don't they do that anymore?
And sometimes that's the case, sure.
They do, yeah.
It can go either way, but a perfect example is with Amazon going into the space they went to. They came into a location, they said, we finally got them locked into a location where they were going to. Theirs was, we have to be in business by a date, because they wanted to get their Christmas business done. So Tim brought all the department heads in. He sat down and said, these people want to come in. This is the building I want to go to. How can we get it done so all the permits are taken care of, all the electrical's taken care of, they got to be in business at a certain time. And it's that type of things that happen with the EDC that make it easier for a business to get going.
Yeah. I want to shift the conversation again a little bit. Mark, I want to make sure we had enough time for you to briefly run down the organization of the Economic Development Commission. I understand you have subcommittee. I know you have subcommittees. I've seen them report out from time to time. I've read the minutes, minutes of your meetings. But if you could quickly tick off your subcommittees, their area of responsibility, and sort of their track record, if you can define that. I mean, maybe it's not that kind of a committee, but
sure, do it very easily. We have 7 commissioners, and we have 3 alternates. And we just brought the alternates on because we felt it was important to have that where we're at. Basically, 3 different departments within that commission. And one would be marketing, of which I'm involved with. A fellow named Tom Collette heads that up. There's retention, and a fellow
Business
named-
retention?
Business
Yeah,
retention,
okay.
right.
Yeah.
So they'll come up with the programs you're talking about, the incentives that you're talking about. But they do much more. They'll go visit businesses. They set up a whole program every year where at least 15 to 20 businesses are visited, and by the mayor, by the heads of the departments, by EDC representatives. How are we doing? How can we be better? It's kind of like the old Ed Koch, the mayor of New York, is, how am I doing today? You know, that type of thing. How are we doing today? What can we do better? And some people will say, you know, you could be better at this. We try to get that fixed. Or, no, it's great. Well, now can you recommend us to someone else? That type of thing. And then the last one is retention,
Liaison?
marketing, and
Planning and zoning.
Planning and zoning liaison,
Liaison,
which
yeah.
is with Jim Wolf. He's vice chair of the commission. And
Joe.
right?
Joe Mayer, yep.
And Joe Mayer, Joe's on that one too?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that. So, and of course, Joe Mayer is our chair, and he runs everything. So, you know, this whole group reports back on a monthly basis. Planning and zoning, as far as we're concerned, is an integral part of all of this, because they're really the ones who set the rules finally, you know. So if you stay close with them and they know what you're thinking, they always have it in the back of their mind. That's basically how the commission works.
I want to save the last 15 minutes for the downtown, but Mark, I wanted to get this question out to you. I'm a believer in management by objectives, some flexibility built in, but management by objectives. So do you have any objectives for your Economic Development Commission for the rest of this calendar year? We will get this done by, and if so, what are maybe the short list of things that you definitely want to get done, or maybe management by objective doesn't fit the public sector? You know, maybe things that just don't work that way in the public, although I think they do, but
Right.
who am I?
I mean,
You know.
yeah, you can manage by objective, and we certainly have goals that we want to set for ourselves. Whether it's going to be within this year or not, sometimes ours are more long-range
Give me
than
the
that.
shortest
But-
term, however you define that, and you define it any way you want.
Well, as an example,
Yeah.
in marketing,
Sure.
We're big on billboards, especially if they cost us very little to no money. Okay? Because we think that if we can get a message out there, even if it's just a quick look at a billboard, it's a message that's out there.
That costs money, so who's going to
Right.
do it, and will it get done?
So we put it in the budget
Yep.
for so many billboards, so much.
How many?
We've
Do you
had
remember?
2 billboards
Okay.
for the longest time, and they've both been on 91 North and 91 South. And basically, the message for the last couple of years has been power, because
Right.
that's what we've been
Yeah.
working on. We just put a third one on now on the Wilbercross Parkway. We have land that was lent to us. We don't own it, but we were able to put a billboard up from Masonic.
Right.
And it just says, Wallingford is open for business. We welcome business. So it's very plain, very simple.
Okay.
It's that type of thing.
What else
That's
you got?
That's an objective, that
Okay.
type of thing. So planning and zoning retention people started looking at different ways that they can set up programs that they can get okayed by the council. And they just did one for the in downtown. Maybe you can explain it a little bit better than I, but
I'd be happy to. So we're working right now with the Department of Transportation, State DOT, on a program that fits in with the Plan of Conservation and Development and the Transit-Oriented Development project that we did, study that we did, to take and reverse engineer property costs in downtown. So, you know, I've said tongue-in-cheek, but in all seriousness, in 1970, when I was an 8th grader at Holy Trinity School, and I looked out the 3rd floor window and looked down the hill, if I did the same thing today, it doesn't look a heck of a lot different. Uptown is doing extremely well. Downtown is tired, and we need to be active in order to take and make something happen. What our biggest challenge in downtown is that it's made up of a lot of small parcels, individual and independent property owners. In order for a project to take place, in most cases, you need to take and assemble several of those pieces of property. Fortunately or unfortunately, individual property owners, everybody thinks that their property is worth, you know, a lot more than, frankly, the market will bear. So as a result, as projects have come, and we've had several that have gotten to the developer property owner conversation standpoint that we've shepherded, they fall apart because the property owners think the property is worth so much more money than it is. So, you know, we're working on a project with DOT right now to take and we've identified and clustered several parcels and this is just, as a worksheet type thing, saying, okay, what do our zoning ordinances allow to be built? They're all in the incentive housing zone, so Casey comes to the plate, overlay incentive housing zone regulation. This is what can be built. This is what we'll estimate the cost of building to be, and that's not just our guesstimate. We're working with professionals in that area. So they'll estimate the cost of building. They'll do a pro forma rent roll. It's mixed use because that's what the zoning allows, which means it'll be retail on the first floor, mandatory, either office on the second, or residential, and you can go as high as 4 stories.
For what purpose? To what end?
To see if we can develop some of downtown and
Who's the
give
we
it
that
the
you're...
facelift. Ideally, it would be people who own properties now that would like to do something. But and we'd like them to think beyond their sliver of property and say, geez, if I talk to my neighboring properties and we get together, we can do something a little bit bigger and update. And we feel market opportunities are excellent right now.
So that's an easy segue to this issue. It comes in 2 parts. You got to wait for the second part. Some people, everyone has an opinion about the downtown. Some people say, and I'm talking now about going down Center Street towards the old train station, the lower part of the downtown. I'm not talking about uptown. I'll distinguish it that way. Some people agree with you that the downtown is looking tired, not much has changed. A business comes in and there's a great hoopla about a business coming in, but then a business goes out, and you sort of have this treading water and not a lot of progress. Parking has been an issue for 15 years. There hasn't been anything material that's happened, but we like to talk about it 3 or 4 times a year, with no real progress. Whether it's the little pocket parking lots, the one near the old train station, and it's always a subject of conversation. There's little programs that really haven't moved the needle, like the utilities has a 10% discount if I'm off by a couple percent. I mean, it illustrates the point. That hasn't moved the needle. The facade program by Wallingford Center Inc. to help business owners finance facades of their buildings, that doesn't seem to move the needle. And so maybe it's time, and I'm obviously preaching here, but that's part of the show. We all. So we've had these properties that have come for sale in the lower part of downtown. Some are for sale now, whether it's the Brothers building or those buildings near the town-owned parking lot near the old train station. The town has passed them up. The price is too high. There's always a reason. But the little measures don't seem to have moved the needle. I mean, I think we agree the town looks substantially the same as it did 20 years ago, and maybe the town
40 years ago.
Right, yeah. I mean, maybe the town just doesn't want the town. I don't know who the town is, but the town is the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Mayor's Office, the Town Council, Economic Development. I mean, maybe that is just too bold. And the way it's been the last 20 years, just fine. Let's do it for the next 20. Both of your thoughts, Mark. We'll start with you.
Well, I think that there's a change now with the TOD, the Transit Oriented District. I think has made a difference.
That's just a study. That's not a district yet.
Well, it's not a district yet. You're right, but at least it's something that everyone can focus around. So you can say, okay, I want to put in for some grant money to put in some lighting, so it makes it nice as you're going to the station. Once people start seeing that things get dressed up on a public standpoint, then they say, there may be something here. My property's starting to improve. My property maybe can be used to do a certain thing that I never thought of before. So I think that in the past 40 years, we didn't have that. I think that we have that now. But all it is an opportunity. And if we don't seize on that opportunity, that's why it's important for anything from the POCD and this initiation group, or this implementation group, excuse me, that it's important that they keep that going, because we are at a ripe time now. That time may not be here 3 years from now. So that's why it's important for us to get on it.
Tim, your thoughts on my comments?
I will start by saying that every process has steps. I have learned in my short tenure here in government that the steps are elongated.
The Wallingford clock.
We started a conversation, in my mind, which would have been on the first step in terms of downtown and its importance to the community. what I quickly found out is not everybody feels the same way about Wallingford's importance to the community. So we had to actually go back steps. The town center, in my not-so-humble opinion, is an asset to this community. It is what I call a sustainable competitive advantage that Wallingford has, that surrounding communities, and I won't name them, but I mean, everybody knows communities that are around here that don't have walkable downtowns. They don't have the opportunity for commerce and residential activity in their town centers, because in many cases they don't have town centers. So we've ratcheted back the conversation, and I think we have come a long way in convincing people in authority that the town center is not just to benefit people who come to town. I've had conversations with people that say, well, a very small percentage of the people in this town even come down here. So why should all 45,000 residents pay or participate in something that's going to help develop the downtown? Well, it's not just my opinion, but there are white papers that prove that a sustainable downtown, a downtown that has active commerce, will drive business to the industrial parks. It's an overall part of the recipe. So if you believe that, and I do believe that, then it drives you to take and try to do something more with the downtown product. So then you start saying, okay, what are the hurdles to making something happen? And they are, as I mentioned earlier, there's small parcels of property. But right now the town is very interested in seeing something done, i.e. an incentive housing zone was established.
Who is the town? You say the town.
Planning and Zoning.
Planning and Zoning Commission?
And leadership. The mayor has supported all of these endeavors as well. We have a tax abatement program for development in the incentive housing zone. None of those, and when we were introducing the tax incentive to the town council to ask for their approval, and they approved it unanimously, none of those in and of themselves are going to bake the cake. I mean, they are ingredients along the way. But what we have now, Mike, with the new train platform is we have the State Department of Transportation very eager, and the state in general, very eager to see development around this new transit-oriented development concept. If you think about where we're talking about pretty much Route 5 and Center Street. We're talking about Hall Avenue, Quinnipiac to the just over the tracks, and then back it up to say North Orchard or so. But certainly down along the lower part of the hill. Now we've got they're state roads. Center Street's a state road. Hall Avenue's a state road. Route 5's a state road. Well, we have the DOT, which is looked at in the eyes of a developer as almost an insurmountable obstacle in some cases when it comes to development. Well, we have them on our side now. They're very interested in seeing something done, and we're working with them hand in hand to do that. Our town engineer, Rob Baltramitis, Casey Costello, our town planner, and economic development are working with DOT on plans to hopefully roll out and show property owners that at this particular point in time, we've got two generations, and baby boomers and millennials, the two largest generations that this earth has seen, are both interested in repopulating town centers. That creates market opportunities. Developers know that. Developers are eager. But the financial dynamics of any project have to work. And right now the financial dynamics don't work because of property costs.
So I'm going to throw out a concept that is purely hypothetical. I'm not saying I like it, but I'm going to use that as sort of bait to get your reaction. But the context of it is sort of my sermon from 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago. We have all these little things, and Center Street looks the same. Now we have a study done by an engineer. All it is a study. The town council was not asked to add money to the budget to trigger something, so it's
not yet.
Like, well, and now things are getting worse. I mean, we had opportunities, in the past, but one year blends into another, and each year is a crisis, and we don't have the money for it. But there are properties for sale down there now. If aggregated, if accumulated and bundled into one large property, yeah, maybe with town money, maybe with a public-private partnership, but it takes a certain level of boldness, of aggressiveness to start collecting these properties. But every time I hear about it, the town council or the mayor says, no, we don't, here's another one we don't want. And I go, okay, more of the same, we'll see you in 20 years. I mean, so you got that. put up a 6-story apartment building. I mean, the younger workers, the younger professionals, they want to have a view, they want to have an efficiency apartment, they want to have amenities, maybe a workout room or something like that near a train station. But you can't do it in 2 or 3 stories. It takes a bigger parcel to make it pay from a commercial developer's perspective. So I'm looking at you guys. You're the only guys I got.
So if I may,
Yes.
in all fairness to Mark, I'm a lot closer to this particular issue. So
Yeah.
another thing that we did was part of our transit-oriented development study is understanding what the absorption rate in a town center of a town our size is.
Explain what
All right,
that
so
is.
the last thing we want to do, so as we look at what's today's opportunity, we also have to say, okay, if we build it out, what does it look like in 10 years? When the market dynamics change again? What does it look like in 15 or 20 years when the market dynamics change again? None of us can predict that. So you go with things called absorption rates. How many apartments can we build and fill and maintain the character of the community and not have an issue 10 or 15 years from now with mass vacancies because the market has shifted? So you mentioned 6 stories. So we did have a developer who came to a price agreement with a particular property owner, but he needed to build 8 stories in order to make it work. So to make the financial
And to be
dynamics
clear, I
work.
was throwing out 6 as an example to get you talking.
Right.
All right. Go ahead.
So,
yeah.
but I mean, anybody who's been in Wallingford for a while, I mean, I can't envision 8 stories in downtown. It's totally out of character. Not only that, but the absorption rate that is in our TOD study, because the statistics are in that study, the absorption rate would be gobbled up by one project. What happens to all the other projects, potential projects that are sitting there? So it's a matter of balancing how many households. Matter of fact, the new apartment building that's been approved on Parker Place is calculated into that absorption rate because of its proximity to downtown. So it's a finite balance, and I hear what you're saying loud and clear. So we have conversations like, how should the town participate in this issue? Should we be buying property? That's a stretch. We have a history of having some issues with that, so let's be frank about it. So anyway, I'll leave it at that, and perhaps for another day. But know that there's a high level of interest on not only our part, but other town departments and other public officials to do something with that, encourage development, the right type of development.
Good to hear. And on the Citizen Mike Show, we'll be watching and encouraging and wishing you the best and commenting when we feel appropriate. It's what we do. But thanks for coming on the show. We have run out of time. An hour has come and gone.
Went fast. Thank you very much for inviting us. We appreciate it.
It was great. I'm sure our viewers learned a lot and appreciate it. Tim, thanks for coming on.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Mark Gingras, thank the Economic Development Commission also for the good work that they do, and for sponsoring you here.
I'll do that for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the Citizen Mike Show. We appreciate it. We're here in the studios on Wednesday afternoons, but you got to see the show Thursday at 9 o'clock. That's when it's freshest, after that Friday at 9. And by then, it's probably on the WPAA website, WPAA.tv. Get to the homepage, scroll down to where you see the Citizen Mike Show. And there you got it. If you can't do that or don't want to do that, Monday, Tuesdays, or Wednesdays at 9. Hey, if it's 9 at night, it's Citizen Mike. Good night, everybody.